Hi there, you're watching the Gardens and Graveyards channel. My name is Charisma and today we're hanging out in the studio and I thought I would sort of talk about a really interesting phenomenon that happens in cemeteries, but really it's not that it happens in cemeteries, it happens around death and people's lives. And my mom actually pointed this out to me many years ago, that she said, isn't it interesting that people seem to die near their birthdays? And I was like, nah, that doesn't happen. And then I started paying attention, and sure enough, a lot of people, probably if you know enough people, you're gonna know enough people that have died nowhere near their birthday and people who have died really close to their birthdays. But in my personal experience, there's a overwhelming majority of the people I know have died within a 30-day, 30 days before their birthday or 30 days after their birthday, or sometime in that 60-day period, which I think is pretty interesting. And to tie that into the full circle of life, I just recently was talking to a funeral home director, and they also, embalm and cremate in their funeral home, and they were answering the question about how much does a bag of cremation ashes weigh. And she said, well, typically a person will, after they've been cremated, will weigh very close to the amount that they weighed at birth, which is just so wild to me. You come into the world at 6 pounds, 8 pounds, 10.5 pounds, and then you leave the world and you could be, a full-grown man, 300 pounds or 180 pounds or whatever it is, and if you're cremated, your body condenses back down to the 6, 8, 10-pound baby that you were. I think that is just like a mind-blowing thought. It's not a hard and fast rule. People don't, everybody dies on their birthday and everybody weighs their birth weight at death, but these things happen so often that people in the death care industry notice the full cycle of life. Totally wild. And today I'm going to talk about famous people who have died on their birthdays. And I'm doing it because this is my birthday week and I thought I would have a little bit of fun. Not that people dying is fun, but if you're in the cemetery and graveyard business, then you find that you have a little bit of a dark sense of humor. And if you're watching this channel and you enjoy the graveyard portion, you probably have some similar humor. So today we're going to talk about some famous people who have died on their birthdays. On my cemetery in Newport, Oregon, I have multiple headstones with birth and death dates that are exactly the same, and I have encountered in the last 3 years that I've been a manager there, I've encountered where people have died on their birthday or the day before or the day after their birthday. It's like, almost made it, just made it. And and the other thing that is really common knowledge, people across all continents that I've talked to about this have experienced, where someone in a long-term partnership passes away and their partner will also pass within a year or less of that person. It's, again, not hard and fast. It doesn't mean you're soulmates. It doesn't mean the longer you're together, the more likely it is that you'll die within a year frame of each other. I've seen newlyweds die within 6 months of each other. I've seen, you know, people who've been married over 50 years not die, you know, within a year of each other. Like, you know, maybe they live another 10 or 15 or 20 years after their spouse. But it does happen quite often that married couples or long-term spouses will die really close together. And I didn't want to bring up those couples that are in my cemetery because I don't, you know, they're not naturally in the limelight. I don't want to just talk about them. I try really hard not to talk about, even when I'm showing you headstones, I try really hard to avoid showcasing people who have died within the last 50 years just to protect their next of kin. Sometimes that is a pain point to see your loved one's name in print on a headstone or spoken about as deceased. Sometimes families are still processing that, and I never want to cause anyone pain by bringing up a family member unless they happen to be someone near and dear to my heart, and I'm talking from my personal experience. So that's why I went with famous people. Their information is all over the internet, and it's, you know, wide public knowledge. And I think now I've got some of them have passed within the last 20 or 30 years. $40 $200. Anyway, we're gonna just talk about them because, like I said, they are already, it's easy knowledge. You could just look up their names and all of their information is out there. There's many others. I just chose these particular people because I feel like they should be honored anyways. I think they are amazing people and they really did something to change the world in some way. So I felt like these were the appropriate people for me to share with you, and I just thought it would be an interesting sort of conversation to have since it's my birthday week. And if you have experienced any of these phenomenons, I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. If you know someone who has passed on their birthday, or if you know someone who's passed within 30 days of their birthday, or a couple that have passed really close together, or any other interesting death facts that you have observed around birthdays and the cycle of life. So researchers call this the birthday effect. It says that you would think that dying on your birthday would be massively coincidental. However, there's studies out there that have shown that your birthday is the day of the year you're most likely to die on. Now, I'm always telling you to celebrate your life, and I think birthdays are an excellent opportunity to celebrate your life, but I hope that that doesn't mean anyone has to celebrate without you. It makes sense if you think about it. You're a relatively healthy person. You might die on your birthday because you overindulged in some way. That puts your safety at risk. On the other hand, if you've been struggling with a lifelong illness that would inevitably claim your life, you might die on your birthday because you're intentionally waiting to experience one last birthday or before letting the illness take you. This also happens around Christmas and different religious holidays. I've also noticed that there's sort of an influx of how many people pass away. All right, with that in mind, let's talk about the 5 people that I chose to share with you about dying on their birthdays. So the first person that I'm going to bring up, and I'm going to go backwards in dates, in death dates. So the first person I'm going to bring up is Betty Friedan. She was a feminist activist that wrote the book, The Feminine Mystique. She changed the lives of women across the world during her 85 years on this earth. She explored how societies force women into roles they may not want for themselves, played a crucial role in launching the women's lib movement, co-founder of the National Organization for Women, and frequently made public appearances advocating for women's rights. She was born on February 4th, 1921, and she passed away on February 4th, 2006. Okay, so then the next person that I'm okay, so then the next person that I'm going to talk about is Ella Josephine Baker, and she is yet another famous person who died on her birthday after spending a lifetime fighting for the rights of others. Baker's grandmother had been an African-American slave who refused to marry a husband her owner had tried to force on her, even though he whipped her for her defiance. This strength inspired Baker to keep her grandmother's legacy alive. She graduated from Shaw University and as a valedictorian in her class, and soon after moved to NYC. She was a part of numerous organizations and social activist clubs. These included not only organizations promoting African American rights, but also general women's rights. During the Jim Crow era, she became a field secretary and director of several branches of the NAACP. Baker's activism didn't end there. She worked with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. to organize the Southern Christian Leadership Conference and assisted many young student activists organizing sit-ins. This earned her the Swahili nickname Fundi, which refers to someone who passes on an important skill or craft to younger generations. She died at the age of 83 on her birthday. She was a civil rights organizer, and she is quoted saying, "In order for us as poor and oppressed people to become a part of a society that is meaningful, the system under which we now exist has to be radically changed. It means facing a system that does not lend itself to your needs and devising means by which you can change that system. That is easier said than done." Ella Baker was born on December 13th, 1903, and she passed away on December 13th, 1986. The next person that I'm going to talk about is Franklin Delano Roosevelt Jr. He was FDR's son, and he didn't achieve as much fame as FDR himself, but he still played a significant role in the 20th century American history. He served 3 terms in Congress and 2 in presidential administration. He was also in the military, an attorney, and a successful businessman in automotive industry. He was born on August 17th, 1914, and passed away on August 17th, 1988. I'm reading notes because I don't know all of these people very clearly, but I am going to be posting their headstones and maybe some pictures as I do this talk, so you'll probably be seeing those already. The next person that I'm going to talk about is George Washington Carver. And George Washington Carver was known as an American botanist and inventor. He passed away from complications of a fall, but he spent his lifetime helping to revolutionize agriculture by promoting the growth of alternative crops to fight soil depletion. His headstone says, "Life that stood out as a gospel of self-forgetting service. He could have added fortune to fame, but caring for neither, he found happiness and honor in being helpful to the world." The center of his world was the South, where he was born in slavery some 79 years ago, and where he did his work as a creative scientist. George Washington Carver was born on January 5th, 1864, and died on January 5th, 1943. The next person I'm going to talk about is Gertrude Astor. She was an actress, in Hollywood, and she began her entertainment career as a trombone player, but then switched to acting and appeared in over 250 movies. And she died on her 90th birthday on November 8th, 1977. She was born on November 8th, 1887. Mostly brought up Gertrude Astor. Not simply because she was a famous Hollywood star, which I wasn't really focusing on Hollywood stars, but I couldn't help but resist putting her in this grouping of people who died on their birthdays, because as I was growing up, I grew up in Southern California, and my grand would, if I acted fancy or got pouty because I wasn't getting my way, she would say, "Well, aren't we Mrs. Astor?" And it's in reference to Gertrude Astor, who was rich and famous and got everything that she wanted in life. And she was beautiful and everybody loved her, but she was also very demanding, and I saw her name on the list and I couldn't resist putting her in there for those memories. Now, the last person I'm going to talk about is William Shakespeare. Yes, the William Shakespeare, the bard and poet that we all know and love. William Shakespeare was born on April 23rd, and at best guess was born in the year of 1564. And he died on April 23rd in 1616, or so it is assumed, according to burial records. He was buried 2 days after that date, and so it hasn't been like absolutely proven, but is commonly celebrated as passing on his birthday. But it's anybody's guess because the records aren't absolutely perfect. He is buried in a church, which is unusual for that time era and his status, but he actually purchased, he basically bought his way into having a grave in the parish. His grave is famous for having an epitaph with a curse upon it, and it was the epitaph that he wrote for his own gravestone, and it says, "Good friend, for Jesus' sake forbear to dig the dust enclosed here. Blessed be the man that spares these stones, and cursed be he that moves my bones." His family later put a bust up in that church of his liking. His son-in-law paid for it, and his wife approved it. So it is the best rendering of his likeness in the world, because she herself, his wife, actually said, "Yeah, that looks just like my husband," which is kind of a cool thing, I guess. Okay. So I hope that was enjoyable and fun, and just a little interesting look into different ways that we can look at graveyards and at how we honor the deceased. And I think that if I ever know anybody who dies on their birthday, I'm not going to be able to resist bringing them balloons and cake every year on their birthday and death date, because what better way to celebrate their life and our love for them than to really do it up in a traditional way. But as always, we can celebrate all of our lives today, right now, and I hope that you do. So until the next video, you keep celebrating your life, and we'll see you next time.